morning, my Bitcoin bulls, DeFi degenerates, and on-chain overthinkers. I'm Hank Hudson, coming to you live from the Bay Area, where the fog rolls in like a liquidity crunch, and the guy pitching a tokenized yield strategy at your coffee shop used to sell shrooms on Discord. It's Friday, thank the good Lord, that magical moment where your altcoins are flat, but your hopium levels are spiking. And today is a special one. We're joined by Kisan Mahalingham, founder and CEO of Tokenizing, a team building the infrastructure to make DeFi, stablecoins, and real-world assets actually work on Bitcoin. Meanwhile, before we get started with our interview, the markets are wobbling like a Dow proposal with no quorum, the Fed's ghosting investors again, and Gary Gensler's off collecting speaking fees for pretending he almost didn't regulate memes. So smash that like button like it front ran your limit order, and follow RoxomTV and me at Hank at RoxomTV. Everywhere they still let you say Bitcoin without triggering a compliance form. So fire up that coffee, reboot your Wi-Fi, and let's unpack the chaos. We're going to take a quick break, but when we're back, our exclusive interview with Kisan. So stay tuned. We'll be back for more. All right, today's deep dive features a guest that is one of the sharpest minds building at the bleeding edge of Bitcoin infrastructure. If you're still thinking of Bitcoin as just digital gold, he's here to blow that definition wide open. He's a CFA chart holder with deep roots in traditional finance, a veteran of crypto's wild frontier, and the founder and CEO of Tokenizing, the award-winning startup that's laying the rails for institutional-grade DeFi directly on Bitcoin's base layer. We're talking decentralized oracles, tokenized treasuries, Bitcoin native stablecoins, not vaporware, but live infrastructure already moving the industry forward. This is a guy who's not just talking about Bitcoin's trillion-dollar future, he's building it. Give a big welcome to the blockchain report, Kisan Mahalingham. Welcome to the show, Kisan. Our audience loves you and they're excited to be here, have you here today. How are you this morning, my friend?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Excited to be here, for sure.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. So we've got a lot to talk about today. And you, my friend, have a super interesting background. So I want to rewind a little bit to your origin story here. How does someone who started in traditional finance end up building bleeding edge infrastructure on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, but first saw Bitcoin back in 2013. Obviously, being in finance, Bitcoin is something that we kind of talked about around the '08 financial crisis and stuff like that. And so, yeah, first looked at it, thought, what is this funny money stuff? We don't actually believe in it, whatever. Dismissed it. He came back again 2016 on the trading floor. Some of my really good friends had bought it, and they came to me and they were like, "Hey, you got to check out this thing called Bitcoin again. We got to just buy it. It doesn't matter if you understand it or not." And so they added me to like a WhatsApp alpha group, and I bought my first Bitcoin. And then I kind of just went down the Satoshi white paper rabbit hole and sort of, 18 months later, kind of left the industry to work in Web3 full time. So
amazing. Now, when you were going down this Satoshi white paper rabbit hole, do you remember like a specific moment on your journey when Bitcoin shifted from interesting asset to something I need to build on? Like, was there a light bulb moment for you during this process?
yeah, for me, I think coming from capital markets, when we first thought about and understood the revolution of what Bitcoin was going to become, it was always going to be a network. It was never kind of meant to be a store of value. It was meant to be a settlement layer, the most secure settlement layer in the world for financial transactions. For things to happen transparently because of all the stuff that happened in the '08 financial crisis. And so, it kind of blows my mind that it took us over a decade to finally start seeing Bitcoin as more than just a store of value and as a programmable economy, because I think that's what the whole premise of DeFi was when I left capital markets, right? It was like, how do we bring traditional finance onto the Bitcoin blockchain to start using the Bitcoin blockchain as a settlement layer for money market transactions, stablecoin transactions, like all these things, right? And so I'm just happy that, finally it didn't exist, so now we're pioneering it, but at least we're making headway now into what we really wanted Bitcoin to become, which is a programmable economy and not just a store of value narrative that like governments and nation states and corporations are now selling to people, right?
Yeah. And as someone who's worn a lot of different hats during their career, I mean, I believe you were a portfolio manager, an advisor strategist, a founder. Which of those skills today do you lean on most now that you're leading Torum?
It's actually a culmination of everything, right? It's like I can fall back on a lot of the, CFA charter holder kind of skill set toolkit as far as like building financial models, building revenue models, like doing all this stuff as a founder early stage, but also having been on the VC side, having seen, a lot of projects not be ready. It kind of helps me prepare for VC funding rounds and stuff like that because I kind of have an idea of what they're looking for as far as the right team members, the right traction, the right product go-to-market strategy and all that kind of stuff. So it's really just a culmination of everything, right? Like I feel like this was the best time for me to actually be a founder, because I probably could have been a founder like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I wouldn't have maybe had the same results or the same ideas or the same strategies. So now having kind of been through all that, all these different roles over the last decade plus, I mean, yeah, now is the prime time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who's worn all these different hats and had all these different roles and is really seizing their moment, I'm really interested in Torum. And I want you to give me and our audience the big picture pitch. Like, what is Torum and why build on it Bitcoin instead of one of the faster or more, developer friendly chains?
Yeah, so I mean, in a nutshell, Bitcoin or what Torm does for Bitcoin is Torm allows Bitcoin to be more than just a store of value by unlocking greater utility to the Bitcoin network and allowing applications to build on top of Bitcoin as natively as possible, no bridges, no layer twos. And the reason why we kind of created Torum was because the biggest problem in this ecosystem was fragmented components of infrastructure. And we saw that on the ETH ecosystem. We saw that in Solana. We saw that in Avalanche. And so we didn't want to do it that way on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not a modular blockchain. So we don't need modular solutions when it comes to when it comes to like the infrastructure stack. So
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of four components that every application needs to build. You need a decentralized Oracle network, an indexer network, smart contract or execution environment, and you need a token standard.
Yeah.
So every application that builds, they might choose Ethereum as their smart contract layer, but then they need to find an Oracle and they need to find an indexer and they need to decide what token standard they're going to use. And so we wanted to alleviate that problem on Bitcoin, given that Bitcoin was more institutional focused, and we built the entire stack. So we are the first and only complete infrastructure and middleware stack on Bitcoin, where when you work with us, there's only one counterparty. It's Torum. It's not four or five different counterparties where you have different levels of risk with different counterparty risks. You have to worry about different companies potentially rug pulling. You have all these other risks as an application or as a builder. So we want to solve that in a way that was simple. It makes it a lot easier for applications to build for institutional use cases on Bitcoin because we provide the entire stack.
Oh, okay. And
Right.
I was reading a little bit about you, Keeson, before. You said that Torum is kind of unlocking Bitcoin's $1 trillion opportunity. And I got to ask, like, what exactly do you feel like that opportunity is, and what's kept it locked up until now?
Yeah, so there's three kind of components to this, right? One is this blue ocean of stuck Bitcoin that does nothing as a store of value, right? That people are just hoarding into wallets and doing nothing with.
Yeah.
So the first thing is how do we unlock that value, right? And that's trillions in and of itself, of just basic collateralized lending products where people can actually uh, either have yield generating products on their Bitcoin or take out maybe Bitcoin native stable coins against their Bitcoin, so they have liquidity on chain. So that was the first. And then the second one was what we believe is actually a bigger unlock here that nobody's talking about, and it's actually why we invented and pioneered this new programmable token standard on Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin native assets. right? You have Bitcoin and then you have Bitcoin native assets. Bitcoin native assets don't exist yet because obviously we just pioneered this new programmable token standard that's going to enable it. But once we get Bitcoin native assets, think about, all this narrative around RWA tokenization, financial asset tokenization, real estate tokenization, all this stuff that people are talking about. Imagine all these assets living on Bitcoin as a Bitcoin native asset, meaning, in its primitive, it's like Satoshis with metadata in it. So Satoshis with metadata in them, we feel will be more valuable than just a Satoshi without the metadata. And so
It-
at the end of it, like Bitcoin itself, I mean, there's only 21 million Bitcoin ever, right? And even at its core, like let's say we broke it down all the way into like Satoshis, right? Right, like its smallest denomination. There's still going to be a finite amount of that denomination ever,
Mhm.
right? So we're going to have to find ways to make each one of those Satoshis have different use cases and values, right? If we want a Bitcoin denominated world or a Bitcoin denominated ecosystem. Right. And so that's where Bitcoin native assets come in. So we can have like a US Treasury as a Bitcoin native asset. So it'd be a Satoshi with metadata, right, of all the data for that
Interesting.
US Treasury asset. So that's what nobody's talking about yet because it's very early for that conversation. And right now everybody's focused on, yield generating assets around Bitcoin and staking Bitcoin for yield. But like we need to move beyond that because you can't have 1,000 people and 1,000 new projects creating collateralized lending platforms, right? Like we need to
Hmm.
move beyond that into different use cases for Bitcoin.
That's super exciting because we always hear that term. It's people are saying we're still early, we're still early, and this kind of means like it applies in a wholly different way than it sounds like a lot of people are thinking about it. Like we always hear we're still early in reference to price, but it sounds like we're still early in terms of what you can build upon like the Bitcoin platform. How did you kind of come up with this idea and this next iteration of what Bitcoin can be in this kind of global economy that we're very much shifting to today?
Yeah, I mean, it was early last year. I was taking a look at the Bitcoin ecosystem. I decided I wanted to be a Web3 founder. And so I would only ever personally build on Bitcoin. And so I started looking at the Taproot upgrade stuff, started looking at, Casey's ordinals and runes innovations. And then I started looking at the ecosystem. And it looked a lot like, 2017 CryptoKitty world, right? Like even before, like we looked like CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties as like, NFTs, but in this case it was ordinals and runes and like Taproot wizards and pizza ninjas and all this type of stuff, right? And
Yeah.
so and so I'm looking at it and I'm like, and then I saw all this wave of like layer twos, right? And there's like at least 10 or 20 or 50 of these layer twos coming out. And I'm like, who built all this primitive infrastructure that's enabling all of this stuff to happen so quickly right after the Taproot upgrade? And so I started looking for the chain link of the world on Bitcoin and the graphs of the world on Bitcoin to figure out, is there a decentralized oracle on Bitcoin? Is there a decentralized indexer on Bitcoin? Like how are applications going to build? And then very, easily found out that none of that stuff existed and everybody was just porting over EVM stuff onto Bitcoin. And so I don't necessarily believe in that narrative that we need to have all this EVM chain stuff on Bitcoin. I feel like everything on Bitcoin should be Bitcoin native or as native as
Hmm.
possible to Bitcoin. And so then I authored a white paper in March last year called Decentralized Oracle and Indexer Networks on Bitcoin. Sent it to my now co-founder and CTO Lee. Um, yeah, and he kind of loved the idea too, and really didn't understand why it didn't exist. The same way Pip existed on Solana and Chainlink existed for EVMs. So it started out, but really just building a decentralized Oracle network for Bitcoin. And then we kind of evolved it into let's just build the entire stack.
That's amazing. And you mentioned like crypto kitties and stuff. Did you ever get sucked into that NFT world like I did? Those were some weird, bad
I did,
times.
man. I lost like 99% of the value on pretty much all my NFTs. And so that's why it's very sick. Like it was fun, don't get me wrong, right? It was fun being part of like a Bored Ape community. It was fun being part of these like, the Solana monkeys and like all these different communities, Star Atlas, all this stuff. But eventually, you know, having lived through that cycle of it, and that was like 2016 crypto, right? I think a lot of the people that are participating in this stuff now on Bitcoin are really 2020 cycle. They're like COVID cycle
Hmm.
crypto. So this is their first cycle of like their NFT run, which is happening in the Bitcoin space and some on the pumped out fund stuff and in Solana and stuff, right? But
Yeah.
we've seen this already. I've been through three bear cycles, right? So we've gone through multiple bear cycles now and saw the survivors and saw people lose like their entire bags, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm not participating in this current cycle of it because I've already been through it. I'm ready for like actual innovation. I'm ready for actual let's move the needle forward for institutional use cases. Let's move the needle forward now under a Trump presidency that's pro crypto. Let's try to do as much as we possibly can as far as market structure bills, stablecoin bills, all this type of stuff. While the government is kind of putting the wind at our backs to do it, right?
Yeah, it sounds like both you and I have kind of taken our medicine when it comes to like investing in pixelated JPEGs of frogs wearing sunglasses. I'm like, what the
Yeah,
heck was I thinking? Like how
can't
dumb
do
could
it
I have
anymore.
been? You know,
Yeah,
at least,
I mean,
some people got it worse though. It seems like you and I are doing okay, but like you were saying, some people lost the farm on some of those
exactly.
investments. So, you
Exactly.
know,
Right. I mean, they made
when
the
I was,
farm too, right? They made the farm too.
yeah,
Some guys were
some
like
people.
so deep into it, sniping stuff on like the NFT drops, and they were doing like 100x on PFPs, right? So like you can't be mad at that, but it's also like, don't cry and complain when you lose it all, right? It's like
Right. It makes me feel better when I see guys like Logan Paul spend like $1 million on NFT and it's worth like $10 now. I'm like, it could have been way, way worse. Now to shift gears a little bit, when I was looking into you, I saw that you focus on something called middleware. It's a term most people outside of dev circles might not fully grasp. Not me, I totally understand it. But for those other people, what does that middleware term actually mean? And why is it such a crucial layer right now?
yeah, so I mean middleware is a very, I guess, Web 2 word. And I'm trying to bring it into Web 3 so people can kind of understand that there's like a base layer. Like think of your operating system on your PC, and then you have all your applications that live on your PC. There's a middleware
Mm-hmm.
in the middle that allows these things to communicate with each other and function, right? And so what we kind of see the same thing for Torm, right? You have the Bitcoin blockchain base layer, right, which is very slow, very limited in functionality, right? And then you have our middleware, and then you have applications that can build on top of our middleware. So we want Bitcoin to do what it does best, which is finality and data availability. And then we want Torum to handle the rest of it and abstract everything else away, which is execution, like execution environment, smart contract stuff, and then data abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when I say middleware, I mean stuff like Oracle networks, indexer networks, all these kind of things make up kind of what middleware software is. Right. So
Gotcha.
middleware is kind of like an all-encompassing word here, where I can just use that to describe our kind of stack as what we do holistically.
Okay, okay. I think I'm getting that. I'm getting
Yeah.
it now. I'm starting to wrap my little peanut brain around that stuff. And going back to Torum a little bit, most DeFi network or DeFi projects seem to sprint to Ethereum or Solana. And you guys have gone native on Bitcoin. Are there like any technical or strategic advantages of doing that? Or is it just Bitcoin's the digital gold standard, so that's where we need to be?
I think Ethereum obviously dominated DeFi ecosystem for a while, and part of that was because it was kind of the first mover, right? Like ETH, like Aave came out, Compound came out, all these like OG DeFi platforms came out on Ethereum because Ethereum was the first one built for applications or mass user applications, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they kind of had all these missing pieces of what I'm describing as middleware, right? And so we saw ETH DeFi peak at like 110 billion or 100 and 110 or 20 billion in TVL a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of never recovered, right?
Yeah.
And so in Solana, I don't know how big Solana DeFi is, but it's obviously not as big or wasn't as big as ETH DeFi. I think ETH DeFi was kind
Mm-hmm.
of the test, right? And so now we know that there's this demand for DeFi. I mean, 110 billion when you're talking about financial markets is really tiny, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about like quadrillion dollar derivative markets and like massive trillion dollar just asset markets. And so
Yeah.
um, the proof of concept is there now as far as demand for DeFi via Ethereum. But I think obviously Bitcoin DeFi has the potential to be at least 100 times greater just based on the demand of Bitcoin. And obviously, why does DeFi belong on Bitcoin? I mean, Bitcoin is the institutional chain that institutions trust. Institutions trust Bitcoin,
Right.
right? Institutions were not playing around in ETH DeFi. That was retail, right? Bitcoin DeFi is going to be completely different because it is going to be dominated by institutions because institutions are the ones that are buying up all the Bitcoin. So once you buy a Bitcoin as a balance sheet asset, corporate treasury asset that we're seeing now with all these pubcos and these reverse mergers and stuff like that, the question is going to become, okay, well, how do I leverage my balance sheet asset? How do I leverage my Bitcoin to get liquidity without actually moving my Bitcoin? And that's going to be the wave of institutional DeFi on Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. That's smart. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you guys have already got a lot of early traction as a result of your works and probably much in part of your decision to build on Bitcoin. I mean, we're talking awards, validators on the testnet, integrations. What kind of momentum are you seeing in the real world right now in accordance with like what you're working on and what you're doing?
I mean, a few things. So one, we'll be at Paris next week as top 17 finalists pitching at Proof of Talk. So if anybody's in
Yeah.
Paris, definitely reach out to us. That's also a very coveted event with a lot of executives and stuff like that. What we're seeing from a demand side is that it's not about the new builders. It's really about all these larger, bigger, multi-billion dollar market cap companies now looking at, hey, how can I participate in this Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem? How can I now like stretch my interoperability strategy to now include Bitcoin, right? And those are the most fast moving or like really good conversations that we're having now is not with the startups, but with the larger companies that are now trying to figure out how to participate in this Bitcoin DeFi move that's about to happen, or the Bitcoin ecosystem in general. And so we're presenting ourselves as the full stack solution to enable them to do that as kind of the invisible infrastructure stack, right? So
Hmm.
anybody in any other ecosystem, it could be Cardano, it could be, Near, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, whatever. If they want to do something as part of the interop strategy on Bitcoin, the best thing is to just simply use our full stack solution to allow them to bridge over into Bitcoin. So that's where we're seeing a
Got
ton
it.
of demand from top stablecoins, from top DeFi RWA platforms. Like they all want into the Bitcoin ecosystem, but they don't know how. And they don't want to pioneer it and they don't want to build it, right? So we're that invisible infrastructure that allows them to reach over across into Bitcoin and participate and offer their existing users, Bitcoin native solutions.
Right. And you mentioned that Torum, you just said a second ago, was named one of the 17 teams selected to pitch at Proof of Talk in Paris. How did that opportunity come about, and what does that mean, for you and your team?
Um, I mean, it means a lot. Like we try to win these things, right? Like we put ourselves out there. Like we just won Hacker News Startup of the Year for Toronto and for Dev Tooling and stuff for 2024. We try to participate, try to get the community engagement because some of these are community voted awards. The one with Proof of Talk, we were seven. There were 17 out of 400 companies that were selected partially by like an
Wow.
AI system that they had, and then partially by like VCs and team members and stuff like that. So. Uh, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, they're the ones that actually reached out to us a couple months ago, and let us know about this event. And then I've just been engaging with the team, um, kind of ever since. And obviously, they believe in what we're building and what we're doing as far as kind of moving the needle on Bitcoin. So yeah, happy to
Yeah.
just get in front of and just present in front of more decision makers because the more people, this is part of an education game, right? Not enough people know that Bitcoin is more than just a store of value. So the more speaking opportunities I get and the more places I can pitch and the more places I can talk about it, is the more education that happens at scale so people can understand that Bitcoin is more than just a store of value, right? They don't need to necessarily invest in us or back us or work with us, but they need to understand that Bitcoin is more than just a store of value and this is the type of infrastructure that exists, and this is what they can do with it if they choose to.
Yeah. And you know, that's one thing that I've seen. I've been in in Bitcoin since about 2016. I used to mine back in the day a little bit, and education always seems to be such a paramount thing in this business, because the more people learn, the more they understand, the more it's kind of hit me over the head. Obviously, this makes sense, and it sounds like you're in the next iteration of that and propelling that next iteration in what you're doing with Bitcoin right now. And when you win something like Hacker Noon Startup of the Year, which I think you won, what was it, in developer tools and what was this, two categories? Was it
And
developer tools and something else?
best startup in Toronto. Yeah.
Awesome, amazing, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does that type of recognition reinforce your mission moving forward and make you and your guys and gals at Torum think like we're on the right path and we just need to keep plowing ahead doing what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that is always validation, right? Like you always want that pat on the back or that championship or that kind of, validation that you're kind of heading in the right direction. But we get that from the community too, right? When we launched our testnet alpha program to onboard, the first set of node operators and validators onto the Torum network, we organically had 5,000 signups in less than 72 hours with zero marketing. And that included, 25 to 30 of the top institutional validators, guys like Validation Cloud, BitGo, Republic, all nodes, like all these guys are running are our validators on Bitcoin in the Genesis set. Right. So that was great validation for us because the first thing we had to do to decentralize our network was get the node operators involved. Right. And on the second phase of that, so testnet V2 is launching this month with the whole stack, including programmability, and then we'll start onboarding the first applications. So yeah, I mean, it's been kind of validation on the pivots we made, on the go-to-market strategy that we pivoted into, and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, it was a lot of just experience in this space and also understanding where the market's moving, right? So
Yeah. And you guys have experienced a lot of early success, it seems like, and things are moving quick, which kind of begs the question to me. It's why do you think it's taken this long for Bitcoin to become a platform people can build on and not just be viewed as a store of value?
yeah, I mean that kind of really just lies with the core devs, right? Like the Taproot upgrade is what really kind of enabled a lot more to happen on Bitcoin, other than what existed before, which was pretty much just like Lightning Network and like Rootstock,
Hmm.
right? And which was
Yeah.
more just around faster payments. Everything
Hmm.
was around the slowness of Bitcoin payments and Bitcoin as a payment, as a currency, right? And so Lightning and
Right.
all these guys are trying to solve that early on as far as Bitcoin micropayments and stuff go. It was really after Taproot when like assets could be built on Bitcoin or you could store data on these assets, right? And so
Hmm.
that kind of changed the game because now you could kind of replicate what happened successfully in ETH and Solana and all these other ecosystems, but now on Bitcoin. So I look at it now as like all these other blockchains, most of them anyway, are just pretty much a sandbox for what's possible on Bitcoin. Right. So you
Hmm.
can use Ethereum as a sandbox and test out whatever and pilot whatever from like a corporate standpoint, and then just build it on Bitcoin.
Yeah. And you mentioned
Right.
upgrades. Do you feel like Bitcoin's traditionally cautious approach to upgrades is protecting the network, or is that something that's actually unintentionally like holding back and stifling innovation? It kind of makes me think of like cryptocurrency regulation, especially like in the United States, right? Like you want regulation to keep the guardrails on so there's not a lot of bad actors in the space, but at the same time, it can stifle new and exciting developments in that space. How do you think how the upgrade approach is working with Bitcoin right now?
I mean, there's two sides to that camp, right? Like obviously there's people that are pro OpCat as an example, and people that are against OpCat, right? And that's
Mm,
just, one example of one that's happening right now, right? But the thing is,
mhm,
I'm kind of on the side that kind of believes in the guardrails because I feel like without it, and without the core guys kind of protecting Bitcoin and the ethos of Bitcoin, what's going to happen is, they're going to approve a bunch of upgrades, and then the like these funny money meme coin guys are going to take this stuff over and start putting a bunch of data that you don't need to exist on Bitcoin, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that's literally what's going to happen is that they want to put more JPEGs and videos and a whole bunch of crap into Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And it's like so like the Bitcoin guy is preserving the standard. I think, yeah, it might stifle a bit of innovation, but it actually stops a lot of the nonsense at the same time, right? So it's
Sure. I mean, we kind of saw that with Ethereum, right? Like it exploded with all these DeFi tools, some of which worked and some that don't. So what do you think Bitcoin devs should learn or should have learned from that? And what should they be avoiding going forward as you continue to build on the Bitcoin network?
I mean, there's a few things. So one, like proof of stake was only a concept on Ethereum, right? Like nobody knew that proof of stake was going to work. And so
Mm-hmm.
we've gone through these different iterations over the last decade of now understanding what works and what doesn't. Especially with DeFi and all these hacks that you see that have happened on major DEXs, major DeFi platforms, like and then people are now trying to figure out like how did that hack happen? What was that security flaw? What was it that how did they manipulate this wallet address and all that kind of stuff? So we need to take all those kind of learnings into Bitcoin, obviously. But I
Mm-hmm.
think now more so with the in the age of AI that we're living in now, it's really different. We didn't have AI tools the way we do now, like three or
Yeah.
5 years ago or 7 years ago when ETH came out, right? So now when we're using AI to help build on Bitcoin, help with cybersecurity threats and help with audits and help with all this type of stuff, like I feel like everything is more secure. It should be more secure in how we kind of build these things and deal with these things because we have AI to model so many different scenarios
Yeah, that
where
makes
we
sense.
didn't have this like a decade ago, right? So like now in like an hour, I can model like hundreds of different scenarios of potential threats, potential hacks, potential leaks, potential weaknesses of an application or of an infrastructure or a tool that was not possible before, right?
Right. Yeah, the
So
AI thing is weird and just the possibilities it's allowing us and the avenues we can go now as opposed to just 5 years ago. Do you feel
that,
like that's been a big boost for you guys too? I mean, with AI comes a lot of benefits, but it certainly has its drawbacks too. Have you found that one way or the other in your journey
yeah,
so
I mean,
far?
it's been beneficial for us, right? Like again, being a pre-seed startup, we raised less than 1 million in funding. And in less than roughly 6 months, we've just built out and shipped more product than half the companies in the space, right?
Wow.
And the only reason we're able to do that as a eight or 9 person team, like throughout this time period, is because everybody's scaling themselves with AI, right? I'm
Yeah.
scaling myself with strategy, modeling, like everything that I'm doing on that side, plus like outreach, BD, CRMs, DMs, like all this stuff. We're automating everything, right?
Hmm.
So part of it is it's like a mix of AI plus like workflow automation, right? Are really the two things that are helping scale, let's say, an 8 person company to make it feel like we're a team of 20.
Hey, are you enjoying this type of content? Well, make sure to like and subscribe to Roxom TV for all the latest Bitcoin news, price action, and interviews just like this. All right, let's get back to the show. Let's pretend for a second that Bitcoin's a city, and you are part of building that city at Torum. Would you say are you guys building the roads for this Bitcoin city, the plumbing, or the power lines? What is your role in this future of this building on Bitcoin that you guys are doing over there right now?
Yeah, so let's say Bitcoin is a city. Let's say you want to fill this city with people, right? Eventually.
Hmm.
And so in order to do that, people need to be able to build houses and apartments and stores and stuff like that. And so we are the ones laying the rails, the piping, the foundation, the streets, everything, everything that allows you to come in and just build your house and come in and just build your store and come in and just build whatever it is that you're going to build to attract people into the city. But
Hmm.
we built all the invisible stuff underneath the grounds, all the invisible stuff that, as far as, think internet cables and everything else, right? We built all of it.
Hmm.
So that you can easily come and build your apartment building, you can easily come and build your store, your supermarket, and your plaza, and now fill it up with people. right? So
That's
we went
amazing.
from building one of these things. We went from just building, let's say, the roads,
Hmm.
to building all of it,
Oh, wow. So you guys are
right? So
really,
yeah,
truly laying the infrastructure for building on Bitcoin in the future, huh?
yeah. Well, and as natively as possible, right? So no bridges,
Yeah.
no layer twos. There's nothing EVM about this. Like we didn't go and import, buildings from another city and like ship them here and put them
Yeah.
here as like a modular apartment, right? We're like laying it all as natively as possible.
Interesting. And as someone who has a real understanding of the current infrastructure of Bitcoin, if you could wave a magic wand right now and fix one thing about Bitcoin's current infrastructure today, what would be your first move?
I mean, the first thing would probably be the time, like the 10-minute block times. I think that
Oh.
is something that nobody can get around because it's part of the core principles of Bitcoin,
Hmm.
right? But like if we didn't have 10-minute blocks and if we had like, let's say faster blocks, and I think that's something that could help really push Bitcoin natively forward. Obviously, we've solved that with kind of a meta protocol on top where we can produce blocks up to 1 second. But
Mm.
yeah, if Bitcoin itself had faster blocks, then we'd actually be able to do a lot more just natively on Bitcoin.
Oh, interesting. And we talked a little while ago about tokenizing real world assets, US treasuries, private equity, directly on Bitcoin. For those of us who don't know, or for those of us watching at home, why does that matter and why is now the time to do that?
Yeah, so Bitcoin, this is what I say, is Bitcoin is not meant to be everything to everyone for every use case. Bitcoin is meant to be for the world's most valuable information because it's the world's most expensive but trusted and secure network, right? And
Hmm.
so what is the world's most valuable information? It's identity data, ownership data, financial market data, and predictive market data, right? So why is Bitcoin the best blockchain for this? Because Bitcoin's the one that everybody believes in trusts,
Hmm.
at least today, that is not going to disappear in the next 50 years, right? That blockchain is the one that's going to actually be here 50 years, maybe 100 years from now, right?
Yeah.
We cannot say the same about every other blockchain because we've seen half of them disappear over the last 10 years, right? Especially if you've been in this space since like, 2013 or 14 or 15, there's so many of these blockchains that have disappeared. Right. And so Bitcoin is the one that people trust. Bitcoin is the one that governments trust. Bitcoin is the one that institutions trust. So then why would you not want your ownership data or your identity data or the world's most secure or valuable financial data on the Bitcoin blockchain? Why would you want it on some other chain is the real question.
Right. So is it part of the security? Is that why, like, in a world where assets are rapidly moving on chain, is it part of the security of Bitcoin that makes it uniquely qualified to handle this,
It's the
rapid
security and the
asset?
adoption. It's the security and the adoption of Bitcoin. Right.
Got
Bitcoin
it.
is the one
Okay.
that's become, with the store of value narrative, everybody eventually is going to be holding some form or shape of Bitcoin or some quantity of
Hmm.
Bitcoin, whether it's through their RIA or 401ks or retirement, any other retirement accounts or, tax-free savings accounts or whatever, right? Whether it's wrapped, whether it's direct, everyone will eventually have, or we believe anyway, some sort of exposure to Bitcoin as an asset for their kids, for themselves, whatever, right? And so
Hmm.
by nature, you are already exposed to the Bitcoin blockchain if you hold Bitcoin, right? Like by default. So the question is, okay,
Yeah.
well, how do we do more with the Bitcoin blockchain if I already hold Bitcoin? Right. Me holding
Right.
Bitcoin doesn't expose me to Ethereum. I don't need Ethereum for gas. It doesn't expose me to Solana. It exposes me to Bitcoin. Right. And so how do I do
Yeah.
more with this asset that I'm already holding? Or how do I move it into different things without leaving the same chain? Because that's where the security risks happen, right?
Hmm.
And so, the premise is, if you owned, let's say we did real estate tokenization on chain, or let's say we did some sort of money market tokenization on chain. So if you had your ownership or your identity data into a tokenized version of your home, let's say it's worth $1 million, right. And
Mm-hmm.
we were able to put that into one Satoshi with the metadata that made that one Satoshi worth $1 million. Well, now you've naturally scaled Bitcoin because now that
Yeah.
one Satoshi is worth more than, let's say, it was worth $1,000 if it was Bitcoin. That one Satoshi with the metadata is worth $1 million,
Oh,
right?
whoa.
So
Yeah.
it's like, do you know what I mean? Like if you can, if you, that's why I say Bitcoin native assets are what's really going to unlock the Bitcoin ecosystem. Because when you can
Mm-hmm.
have, Satoshis that are all the same, but ones that have different metadata are worth different values, then you're now actually creating an ecosystem, and you're scaling Bitcoin natively,
Okay. Interesting.
right?
Interesting. Man, this is fascinating. Lot to wrap my head around. So let me ask you this. Of all the use cases that are coming, I mean, we're talking Bitcoin backed lending, stable coins, tokenized assets. Which one do you think reaches escape velocity first on the Bitcoin network?
Stablecoin.
Stablecoin, why is that?
Stablecoins, I mean, for multiple reasons. One, stablecoin is what the US is pumping. Stablecoin is what the it's one of the first ones that's going to have regulatory clarity. Stablecoins is probably the first one to have product market fit globally as far as digital assets because people understand fiat-backed digital currency,
Hmm.
right? And so a US dollar
Yeah.
backed or euro backed coin or brick, what any kind of asset backed token, but let's say US dollar backed in this world, right? Like having a US dollar
Hmm.
backed Bitcoin native token allows you to move between Bitcoin, your kind of treasury asset or your balance sheet or saving account asset, and then Bitcoin liquidity on the same chain.
Yeah.
Right. So then you would never have to leave the Bitcoin network. So like I would never have to send you my Bitcoin. Let's say we went out, I was transacting with you, right? I would never
Yeah.
have to send you $5 in Bitcoin. I could send you $5 in a Bitcoin native stablecoin and keep my Bitcoin,
Okay.
right? So I'm
Ah,
not
got
losing the
it.
appreciation of my Bitcoin. I'm sending you $5 as a stable coin, but on the Bitcoin network, right?
Hmm.
So that's one of it. But two, like the stablecoin thing on Bitcoin doesn't really make sense for like retail size transactions, right? Like small dollar value transactions don't make sense because eventually the network fees will be high, right? So we look at it as more of like an institutional net settlement mechanism. So let's say I'm JP Morgan in your city and I owe you 50 million, next Friday for some sort of FX settlement. Well, I can now I can send that to you instantly, T0, um, at a very cheaper cost than what I'm paying all the other intermediaries and Swift and all these other networks in the middle, right? Just by doing it natively on Bitcoin.
Interesting. And as someone who came from TradFi and is now at the cutting edge of Web3, right? What do you feel like TradFi still gets wrong about crypto? And what does crypto still not really understand about TradFi as we kind of merge these two worlds into this next evolution of finance?
Yeah, I think so. From the TradFi perspective, I mean, they're not wrong. They're wary and they're very risk averse and they're scared and they have the right to be because like 90% of crypto is kind of vaporware and like, just like funny stuff. And then
Hmm.
every other week you see some sort of rug pull or some sort of hack or some sort of thing
Yeah.
that kind of throws them off guard, right? And then they're like, yeah, we knew this thing wasn't real, right? And it's like
Yeah.
so the only thing that they really actually believe step by step is Bitcoin, right?
Right.
And so at least the TradFi guys I talk to, like obviously they want to make money on these other assets, they want to participate, they want to create ETF wrappers, they want to do all this stuff to participate in like this new world of money and like new value capture, right?
Hmm.
But Bitcoin is the one that they really understand. That's why their focus is like Bitcoin and stablecoins, right? It's like, what can we do with
Yeah.
Bitcoin and stablecoins, right? Because those are the two things we understand that actually make a lot of sense, right? And that's why we're seeing a lot more like OTC desks with like collateralized lending against Bitcoin, borrowing against Bitcoin, but you don't see it against all these other kind of altcoin assets, right? As much anyway,
Right.
until
Yeah.
recently. Um, So that's one thing. And then I think on the crypto side, what they don't understand is the levels of red tape and compliance and structure that goes into traditional finance. It's not a, and they're there for a reason. Like half the things that happen in the DeFi space would never happen if they had the kind of checks and balances that they had to go through um, from a TradFi perspective. As far as all the different layers of compliance and checks and the speed of how they move, which is kind of a good and bad thing, right? But DeFi
Yeah.
obviously moves a lot faster. You can do things a lot quicker because a lot of it is peer to peer, but it also has its own risks, right, of being able to do that. So,
Yeah. I have an interesting question for you. Well, I think it's interesting. Um, you mentioned like TradFi's resistance to fully embrace crypto because there is like a ton of vaporware out there, like you said, about 90%. Then we see things like presidential meme coins out of the US. There was the
okay.
Libra meme coin disaster in Argentina. How do you think that affects TradFi? Because it's the governments are embracing the crypto to an extent, right? But then it also there seems to be an element of it that makes it seem less serious. It almost feels like a two steps forward, one step back. So do you feel like these types of things like Trump coin or Libra are overall helping the cryptoverse, or is it maybe unintentionally setting us back a little bit further?
I mean, I think those are just businessmen men trying to capitalize on business opportunities. Right,
Yeah,
that's all it really is. It's business-minded men trying to capitalize on business opportunities, which is what Trump does his entire
yeah,
career. Right. So like
it's true.
if he can make $500 million bag doing some Trump coin thing while he's president and he's not offside, he's gonna do it. Right?
Yeah,
Because he's just taking advantage of the opportunity. So I don't think we need to read any more into that other than that's just Trump just being Trump and being a businessman about it. And then you have some of these other countries that, are failing or have trying to figure out a way to balance their budgets and balance their treasuries and stuff like that. Or balance their government deficits. And yeah, creating a coin out of thin air and calling it a country coin or something like that um,
yeah.
is one way to go about doing it, right? But that's just kind of
Hmm.
people stretching, um, and trying to make something happen because their country's in trouble,
Right.
right? So
No,
I don't look at it any deeper than that. I don't think it does anything for the ecosystem. It doesn't hurt it. I think the TradFi guys already understand it. They're just like, yeah, this is just business and opportunity. That's all it is. It's Trump being Trump, right?
yeah. No, you make a good point. I mean, this is a guy who has sold, hosted a game show, sold steaks, had casinos, sold board games. So it's like this is just an opportunist being an opportunist, right? So,
Exactly.
with all that being said, what do you think finally pushes traditional institutions from talking about Bitcoin infrastructure to actually using it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be something that happens gradually over time. I think right now they're getting used to, or they've been boxing stuff. Everything's kind of been stuck in some sort of like UAT testing or some sort of um, non-production environment, right?
Hmm.
And so I think part of that is still not having that full comfort level with the technology itself. To not
Hmm.
having big enough teams. Like, we had this conversation 5 years ago. All these companies were pretty much brought one person in and called it their digital asset team. The digital asset team was one
Hmm.
person, right? And then now you're seeing the expansion of these teams into like 5 people, 10 people, right? Internally inside of these larger organizations, right? So I think they're slowly getting there. They need more bodies that understand it in a way that's beneficial and kind of risk reduced for for their organizations. Um, and there's a lot of work here around like regulation, privacy preservation of data. So I think we'll eventually get there, and I think when they do choose which blockchain to build on, I think if Bitcoin is in the conversation as a blockchain that they can build on, I think they'll all choose Bitcoin first.
Yeah, that
Like,
makes a
like
lot of
if you
sense.
told me, yeah, like if you told me, hey, I can build, a tokenized Fidelity product or a tokenized Bank of America product, and in front of me you put Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin, and Avalanche. Why would I choose anything other than Bitcoin first? Right? Like I'd
Right.
choose Bitcoin first, and then if you told me it wasn't possible, then I'd start looking at other options. Right? But like if you told me that I could do it on Bitcoin and I already know that I hold Bitcoin, then I'm going to do it on Bitcoin. Right? And that's what
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist yet. That's what we're pioneering. But eventually, let them all choose which one they want to do it on. We just feel that they would do it on Bitcoin if they could. Right? It's not
Yeah.
to say that, the other ones don't have purposes, other chains don't have purposes, but we feel institutional belongs on Bitcoin. So
Right. No, I hear that. And I know we got to let you go here soon, but I do have one more question for you before we go. We're at this inflection point. Crypto used to be this wild, wild west, and now we're seeing institutional adoption. We're seeing governments getting on board. Going forward, do you feel like the regulations that we're starting to see, especially from the government level, are the things that are going to unlock these systems, specifically Bitcoin, to scale? Or are regulations actually more of an anchor that could be slowing down progress in the future?
no, I think regulation will allow it to scale. I think, and this comes from traditional finance, right? Is that uncertainty is what keeps markets parked, right? Once you have, it doesn't matter if the regulation is pro or against, as long as you have the clarity, you can move forward, right? And so we're at that point here in crypto as well, where it's the uncertainty that's holding the entire market back. If policy came out and said you can do A and B and you can't do C, that's fine. Then people know how to move forward, right? And so I think that's what we're waiting for. But also coming out of Bitcoin Vegas, so I just came out of Bitcoin Vegas, and a lot of the senators were there. Republicans obviously too, mostly. But they're talking about all these bipartisan bills, that are kind of coming up, and all the stuff that they're trying to do before the August recess. And they made a valid point, right? A lot of these things are not bipartisan. It's not like Democrats against Republicans. They're kind of nonpartisan items, right? That kind of move the entire country forward, which then eventually moves a lot of the other countries forward because everybody kind of sits and waits to see what the US does, right? And so I think if they do what they say they're going to do, and it sounds like they're making a lot of headway to get everything done by the August recess, I think we'll have a lot of that clarity sooner than later, and then um, all these companies can either come back to the U.S. and start building with clarity, or all these companies that want to participate in U.S. markets will have the clarity they need to move forward, right?
Well put. Yeah,
And
no,
that's kind of
that
that's
makes
kind of the
sense.
point. Yeah.
And you said you were at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas last week?
Yeah, I was there.
We must have missed you. We had a booth. Next time, we're going to have you stop by. It was a
We
good
could have done
time.
this live. Yeah.
I know. That's all right. Well, we'll learn for next year. So, Keeson, before I let you go, if people want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about Torum, where can I send them?
Yeah, so go hit up our Twitter at Torum_XYZ. All the links are in our profile. We just released the white paper 2.0 a couple months ago, so definitely read that. We have a lot of articles on our token standard, and how to use Torum, what Torum does, all the different use cases and stuff like that also available. You can find those links on the Twitter account. You can also connect with me on Telegram at CryptoKeeson, or join our builder community at Torum Builders on Telegram. And yeah, and we're fundraising right now. We're raising our seed round. So happy to talk to anybody that's kind of interested.
Amazing. Well, Keeson, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been so interesting and enlightening learning about you and Torum and what you're doing to build the infrastructure of the future of Bitcoin. You are certainly welcome back on this show anytime, and we really appreciate you and your time today. Thank you so much for stopping in.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.